Have you ever witnessed a moment where justice comes in silence? Bully slaps a woman on the train, then realizes she's Vin Diesel's wife. You never know who someone truly is until it's too late. That's what every person on that train learned the hard way that Monday morning, when a cocky young man picked the wrong woman to humiliate. And the entire subway car found itself holding its breath as justice came wearing a leather jacket and walking in silence. Are you ready for the twist that changed everything? It was just after 8 a.m. in New York City. The 4 train coming in hot from Crown Heights Utica Avenue was crammed as usual. Gray skies hung low over the skyline, and the scent of burnt espresso and wet pavement clung to coats and scarves. The subway doors hissed open at Atlantic Avenue Barclays Center, and more passengers squeezed in, shoulders brushing, earbuds in, eyes cast down. She entered without fanfare, a woman in her early 40s, quiet, composed. Her name was Elena, though no one knew it then. She had warm brown skin, dark hair pinned neatly, and a face that told stories without saying a word. She wore a simple black coat, and carried a canvas tote bag against her chest like it held something precious, which it did: 2 red delicious apples, a fresh loaf of sourdough, and a jar of fig preserves she'd picked up from a tiny market near Prospect Heights after visiting her sister. She moved like someone used to being ignored. She wasn't flashy, didn't take up space, didn't invite attention, but she deserved respect just like anyone else. Across from where she stood sat a young man sprawled out across 2 seats. His hoodie hung off one shoulder, bass-heavy music pulsing from the speaker clipped to his backpack. He didn't look up from his phone as Elena stepped closer and offered the politest voice the city rarely hears. "Excuse me," she said gently, "would you mind moving over so I can sit?" He didn't flinch. "Train's full," he muttered. "Got to claim your spot early," then louder, as if speaking to the entire car, "Ain't my fault you slow." He stretched his legs out farther. No one said anything. A man beside him blinked behind his glasses and looked away. A teenager in a puffer coat watched silently, then went back to scrolling. Elena didn't argue. She just stayed standing, steadying herself on the pole. As the train pulled away from Nevin Street, it jolted, typical for that part of the track. Elena's shoulder brushed lightly against the young man's arm. Barely a nudge. He recoiled as if she were diseased. "Yo, don't touch me, lady." Heads turned, then turned back just as fast. Elena's cheeks colored. She murmured, "I'm sorry," and tried to shrink smaller, but he wasn't done. "Y'all see this? Some people don't know how to keep their hands to themselves," he said, eyes flicking around the car like a stand-up comic, hungry for attention. Then he grinned, eyes locked on her tote bag. "What's in the bag, huh? Grandma groceries? Some prunes or something?" Elena clutched it tighter. "Please don't." He reached for it anyway, flicking the edge with 2 fingers. The bag shifted. One apple tumbled out, then the other. They rolled under seats, the way dignity does in moments like this. She dropped to one knee, slow and steady, trying to retrieve them. The young man leaned back smugly, watching. Just as she reached for the second apple, he swung his elbow back, sharp and fast. It hit her in the chest. She gasped and fell sideways into the subway door. Not a scream, not a cry, just the breath knocked clean out of her. The sound of her body hitting metal was dull, but it was the silence that followed that rang the loudest. Still, no one moved. Not yet. He leaned forward and smirked. Lesson of the day: don't lean on people you don't know. People glanced around awkwardly. A woman clutched her purse tighter. A teenage boy bit his lip. A man near the back raised his phone, then thought better of it. And that's when something shifted. A man who'd been standing in the far corner of the train finally looked up. He'd been there the whole time, unnoticed like a statue, heavy leather jacket, boots planted wide, bald head, shoulders that looked carved from brick. Eyes sharp, still, and now locked in. "Can you guess what happens next?" He began walking. Not quickly, not dramatically. Just one slow step at a time. Past the college kid gripping his laptop bag. Past the woman pretending not to hear. Past the man who adjusted his glasses but said nothing. The young man still didn't notice. "I'm just saying," he announced, people act like being old means you get to do whatever. Like you special or something. He reached toward the bag again, but this time a voice cut through the subway like a blade. Pick it up. The young man blinked, confused. What? The man was close now, 2 feet away, voice low, calm, dead serious. The bag. Pick it up and apologize. The thug turned his head slow. The man staring back at him. Wasn't just anyone. Yo, the other passenger muttered to the person beside him, is that? The thug squinted. What are you, her husband or something? The man didn't blink. The thug laughed. You her bodyguard? What you going to do? Give me some fast and furious speech. And that's when he said it. I am Vin Diesel. The car went silent. Phones came out again, but no one was laughing. Another passenger, a stocky man in a NYX hoodie, shifted uncomfortably and glanced toward the front of the car. Someone call the conductor, he murmured, but no one moved. This wasn't the kind of moment where people reached for help. This was the kind of moment people watched because something was unfolding. Something you couldn't look away from. The thug's friend, the one in the zipped hoodie, took a step forward now, voice louder, bolder. Yo, Dre, you good? Dude acting like he owns the train. Dre glanced back, grateful for the backup. Man thinks he's Vin Diesel, he snorted, talking all serious like he's about to narrate a monologue or some, but he never finished that sentence. Vin took a single step forward. Not fast, not aggressive, just one slow, certain movement, and that was enough. Dre stopped talking. The air in the car felt different, like pressure had dropped, like the moment before a thunderstorm. Vin's eyes didn't narrow. His voice didn't rise. But when he spoke, it cut through the air like a blade through silk. You hurt my wife. That was all. 4 words. No threat. No rage. Just fact. Dre chuckled nervously. Man, come on. I didn't mean nothing. She just bumped me. That's all. He tried to throw a glance at the other passengers seeking support. Nobody met his gaze. Vin looked at Elena. You okay? She gave the slightest nod. A little bruised, she said. Her voice was soft, but it carried. The subway car had gone completely still. No one even shifted their weight. Vin turned back to Dre. Then you're going to fix it. Dre's eyes darted. Fix what, man? You acting like I broke something. Then, as if needing to prove he still had control, he laughed and bent down dramatically, scooping up the bruised apple with 2 fingers. He held it out to Elena with an exaggerated smile, then dropped it on the floor before she could reach it. Oops. It rolled, hit the edge of Vin's boot, and stopped. The train clattered on beneath them, the rhythm of the tracks like a clock ticking down. Vin stared at the apple, then lifted his eyes. Dre shrugged. Man, come on. You really going to act like this is some kind of crime scene over fruit? Vin didn't answer. He took another step forward, slowly lowering his voice. Do you have a mother? Dre blinked. A sister? Vin asked. What's that got to do with anything? Vin leaned in, quiet and cold. Then you should know better. The crowd shifted again, an almost imperceptible movement of people adjusting their footing, leaning in just slightly, like instinct was telling them this was the edge of something big. That's when the second guy, the heavier one in the zipped-up hoodie, stepped in. Yo, you trying to intimidate us? I don't care who you are. This ain't a movie, bro. He squared his shoulders like he'd seen people do in boxing matches. Vin's gaze flicked over to him. I've seen worse than you. The man paused. He had expected to be barked at, shoved, maybe even threatened. But this calm certainty, it was something else, something he wasn't ready for. He looked to Dre for a cue, but Dre wasn't looking so sure anymore. A sudden jerk in the train's motion knocked everyone a little off balance. And in that moment, Dre lashed out. Maybe from fear, maybe from pride. He shoved Vin with both hands hard. Vin took a half step back, not because he had to, but because he let it happen. He steadied himself like nothing had touched him. Dre hesitated. His bravado faltered. He tried again, another shove. Vin caught his wrist mid-motion. Not violently, not to hurt, just enough to stop it. And in that second, Dre understood exactly what he was up against. It was like hitting a brick wall. His eyes widened as he tried to pull back, but Vin didn't tighten his grip. He didn't have to. The second thug, sensing things were unraveling, lunged. Vin released Dre's wrist and turned, slipping under the second guy's arm and guiding his momentum straight into the side rail of the subway. He hit the metal with a sickening thud and crumpled. Dre stumbled backward, arms flailing, mouth open like he wanted to say something clever, but all the words had disappeared. Vin stepped forward again. "You should have walked away." Dre backed up until he hit the subway door. He looked around for support. No one offered it. Even the man filming earlier had lowered his phone, watching with his bare eyes now, not wanting to filter this through a screen. Elena, still near the corner, clutched her bag and watched her husband. She didn't call to him. She didn't need to. This wasn't about rage. It was about respect. And for people like Vin Diesel, respect was never optional. As Dre tried to shift sideways, bumping into a woman holding a stroller, another figure rose from the far end of the car. No one had noticed him before. Hoodie pulled tight, hands in his jacket. He walked silently through the aisle like a shadow peeling off the wall. Then he stepped forward and swung. A short, thick baton, a mall cop's nightstick, sliced through the air and hit Vin square in the side of the head. The sound was dull, but deep. The entire train gasped. Elena screamed. Phones flew into the air. Vin dropped. His knees buckled. His shoulders smashed the pole. He fell hard, his head hitting the steel floor with a sickening bounce. For the first time, Vin didn't move, and the subway car turned to chaos. Vin's body lay still on the subway floor. The man with the baton stood over him, breathing heavily, face blank, not smug, not angry, just cold. Around them, the entire car froze, voices rising in panic, but movements suspended in fear. Elena dropped to her knees beside her husband. "Vin," she said, her voice cracking, hands trembling as she touched his shoulder. He didn't respond. The thug who had hit him glanced around the car like he was proud of the silence he'd created. A few people whispered, "Did he kill him?" But Elena didn't hear them. She was watching Vin's chest. And then it rose, a shallow breath, then another. His fingers twitched, the barest motion against the floor, but it was enough. She leaned in closer. "Vin," she whispered, "please." His eyes opened slowly, not wide, not dramatic, just enough to see her face. Then he blinked once, and it was like watching a storm return to the sea. The man with the baton took a step back, not out of guilt, but caution. Something had shifted. Vin didn't speak. He didn't groan or swear. He planted one elbow behind him, then the other, and slowly, like a man carrying more than his body weight, pushed himself upright. Blood streamed from his temple down his cheek, staining the collar of his jacket. But his eyes were steady, focused, controlled. He used the pole beside him for balance, taking one breath, then another. Then slowly he turned his head toward the man who had struck him. The thug shifted, gripping the baton tighter. He raised it again. Elena stood now, voice low, but fierce. "Don't." It wasn't a scream. It wasn't a plea. Just one word and it stopped the man mid-motion. He hesitated. Vin rose to his full height. The train rocked slightly on the tracks, but his balance didn't waver. His body swayed like a tree absorbing wind. The man swung again, but Vin stepped in too close for the baton to build force. His left hand caught the thug's wrist midair, holding it steady. Then he twisted. Not violently, just precise. The baton clattered to the floor. The thug tried to yank his arm back, but Vin didn't let go. Instead, he took a step forward, placing a hand on the man's chest and shoving. Not with brute force, but with perfect aim. The thug staggered, lost footing, and slammed back into a pole, sliding down to one knee. He wasn't unconscious, but he wasn't getting up anytime soon. Vin didn't gloat. He didn't look at the crowd. He turned to Elena, took the crushed tote from her hands, and gently placed it on a nearby seat. One apple remained, bruised, but whole. Then slowly, he turned back to Dre, who was still frozen against the subway doors. Their eyes met. Dre's bravado cracked like thin ice. Vin took a step toward him. Dre scrambled sideways, tried to open the emergency door, slammed his palm against the panel in desperation. It didn't budge. The train hadn't stopped. The tunnel outside was still black. He turned back, wild-eyed, and threw a punch. Vin dipped to the side, letting the momentum slide past him. Then, in one fluid motion, he caught the man's arm, hooked his elbow around it, and twisted. A sharp crack echoed through the car. Dre screamed, crumpling to the floor, clutching his arm. Vin stepped back, not to admire his work, but simply to breathe. That made 3 down. The heavier thug, still crouched near the pole where he'd hit earlier, growled and lunged. Vin turned just in time to sidestep. The man flew past him, tripped on the legs of his fallen friend, and slammed chest-first into a metal bench. The sound was ugly. Air knocked from lungs, bones colliding with steel. He didn't get up. 4. The man with the baton stirred again. Rage burned now where cold calculation had been. He didn't bother with weapons this time, just fists. He charged at Vin with everything he had. Vin waited. As the man swung wildly, Vin ducked once, rolled under a second punch, and then drove an elbow into his gut. The man gasped, folded, and Vin stepped into his space, delivered a shoulder check so forceful it sent the man sprawling into the wall. This time, he didn't move, not even to breathe hard. The subway car was utterly silent. No cheers, no clapping, just shock. Some people had recorded it. Others had forgotten they were holding phones at all. Vin stood near the center of the car, breathing steady, blood drying across his face, jacket torn at the shoulder. He turned slowly, eyes sweeping the space. No one challenged him. No one even blinked. He walked back to Elena, picked up the tote bag from the seat, and handed her the lone surviving apple. Her hand trembled as she accepted it. And then she looked at him, not with fear, not with awe, just with love. She placed a hand on his arm. He exhaled, letting the weight of everything release from his shoulders. A teenage boy near the emergency door lowered his phone slowly. He looked at his mom. Was that Vin Diesel? She didn't answer right away. She was still staring at the man who had stood up, bled, and stayed standing. Finally, she nodded. Yes, baby, I think it was. At the far end of the car, the first thug, the one who had knocked the groceries, who had laughed when she fell, was still curled up near the door, holding his elbow, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. He wasn't sneering anymore. He wasn't talking. He wasn't even pretending he understood what had just happened. He looked at Vin like someone who had just realized the lion wasn't in a cage and never had been. Vin didn't look back at him. He didn't have to. He stared ahead toward the front of the train, waiting for the next stop. The speakers crackled overhead. Next stop, Grand Central 42nd Street. The crowd shifted but stayed quiet. No one dared move. Vin turned to Elena. You ready? He asked softly. She nodded. Always. He placed a gentle hand on the small of her back. The doors opened with a hiss. The two of them stepped out together. No one blocked their way. No one tried to follow. No one asked for a selfie. They just watched as the couple disappeared into the morning light of the station, boots tapping against tile, shoulders brushing side by side. A man in a suit near the front of the car slowly pulled out his earbuds like the music he'd been listening to no longer mattered. A woman near the pole clutched her toddler closer. She didn't speak, but her eyes were glassy. At the far end, One of the earlier thugs coughed and immediately winced as if the sound itself was dangerous. The train door shut. The car rattled on, but the silence wasn't awkward anymore. It was reverent. A few phones were raised again, but not to go viral, just to remember. Because for the rest of their lives, the people on that train would carry the memory of what they saw that day. They wouldn't remember the exact words. They wouldn't need to. They would remember the stillness, the weight of quiet strength, the way a man bled and still stood, protected, not with rage, but with resolve. Outside the train, Vin and Elena moved through the Grand Central Concourse like any other couple. The world bustled around them, commuters rushing, tourists snapping photos, vendors shouting about bagels. No one knew what had just happened below. No one needed to. Vin pulled out a crumpled shopping list from his jacket pocket, unfolded it slowly. It had a streak of red across one corner. He looked at it, then at Elena. "Still want those apples?" She smiled faintly. "Only if they're ripe." He nodded. "They always are." And with that, they stepped into the city. No spotlight, no fame. Brought to you by BUP Stories.